Hi there, this is Maneesh Vijaya from PMP bringing to you yet another power-packed episode on PM Ninja video series. In this particular video series, we are going to talk about some of the most confusing things which are showing up in PMP exams 2021. So instead of the normal power impact kind of a grid for prioritization of stakeholders, nowadays in the examinations for PMP 2021, you get completely new grid that you may not have seen in PMBOK or any other related material whatsoever. Now there are things like influence commitment grid for prioritization of stakeholders which are showing up. How do you deal with that? Because questions do come on that, and sometimes they are scenario questions. So in order to understand this well, keep watching. All right, so here's the thing. When you have a grid like this, which is influence commitment grid, in that case, you need to understand that, as a general rule, this shows low of whatever that is here and high of whatever that is here. Same is the case, low of whatever that has been shown on this axis and high at the top. So now this means that the higher up you go onto this axis, the higher would be the commitments towards the happening of this project. Now understand, there's a difference between influence and commitment. For example, I am very committed to my country, right? The country that I come from, I'm very committed. I really want it to grow. I will do whatever that is possible to make sure that everybody follows the law and that we do something that it becomes famous. But the fact that I'm committed does not mean that I have the influence to change the direction of my country. That belongs to the elected leaders, the ones who are in the parliaments. They have the influence. But unfortunately, because of the kind of ideology that some of them may have, they may have a very high influence. Everybody sitting in the parliament have a very high influence over the outcome or the direction in which the country will be taken, but they may not have as much commitment because of their own personal agenda or whatever ideology that they have in mind. Understand the difference. Influence is the ability to get something done through others on a specific subject. Commitment is how closely you align yourself with that particular objective. Commitment is something a little emotional. Influence, on the other hand, is the ability to get things done. Now, in any project, like any other objective that you set out to, you would have stakeholders with different kind of influences that they can exert on the project. Right? They can open doors for you, they can make things happen, and the influence could also work negatively. Somebody who has a very high influence on the project can also be detrimental to the project simply because they have the high influence to close it down, right? To refrain it, to throttle it from getting the necessary resources because they, the influential people connected to that project, fear that this project may not be that viable or it's not so high on priority on the scheme of things, of the strategy. And therefore, just don't assume that influence, a high influence would necessarily mean it'll be positive for the company. It simply means that they have a lot of influence on the outcome of this project, how this project gets done positively or negatively. And just because they have an influence does not necessarily that they have high commitment. Having said that, now let's look at the grid. High influence, that if you've identified a lot of stakeholders. The first step will always be, no matter which grid you use, the first step will be identify all possible stakeholders. That will always be true all the time. Identify as many stakeholders as you can, and once you identify all the stakeholders, for each of the stakeholders, for each of them individually, you have to ask two questions when you're talking about this grid. Dude, this particular stakeholder, does he have high influence? And if some of the people who are actually engaged in this prioritization, they say, well, you know what? Yeah, they have a high influence. They can really affect the outcome of this project. They can change the direction of this project. They have a massive influence in this project. Negative, positive, that's beside the point right now. They have a high influence. That means this person could be anywhere here on this side of the grid, not on this side because that person has a high influence. But then the work is still not over. We need to ask this for this stakeholder another question, and that is, how much of commitment does he have in the outcome of the project? How much is he committed to the project? Does he see value in this project? How is he getting affected? Does he have anything on stake for this particular project? Right? So that's called commitment. So the second question is, hey, how much committed is that person towards this project? And the person says, well, they have hardly any commitment. Whether this project happens or not, this person is least bothered, right? Therefore, now we mark that person over here. This person is here. High influence, low commitment. What kind of a person do you think this fellow would be vis-a-vis your project, right? Dangerous, right? Because they have the high influence, they can change the direction of the project without being bothered which direction it takes, because they are not affected by the outcome. They have low commitments or very low commitments towards this project. Their interest is somewhere else, and therefore keep these people satisfied. Be very diplomatic with these people, right? But on the other hand, if you have people showing up here, they are one of the most crucial stakeholders. They are your key stakeholders. Key stakeholders would mean persons or stakeholders with high influence and also high commitment. But because they are in the same group, they are in the same boat. You may have people with high influence with a negative attitude towards this project because the commitment is high. Now, when the commitment is high, sometimes you feel this is not the best direction that the company should be doing. This project should not have been undertaken by the company. They think it was a wrong decision. It's not that they are negative people by nature. It's just that they feel because their commitment is very high, they feel that this project may not be the best thing that we should be doing with our limited money and the resources that we have. And therefore, over here, you need to be engaging with the stakeholders. You need to understand why is it that this high influence stakeholder finds it to be negative. And if there is a high influence stakeholder who has a positive influence towards this project, has a positive commitment, and therefore you need to bring them into leadership position, not just supporters, but should be able to share your load. You'll have additional pair of shoulders to share the load of the project. You can actually delegate or even upward delegate a lot of stuff to them and they will get things done because they are in the same boat. So these are the people you manage very closely. Manage very closely. These ones you just keep satisfied. Right? Just keep them satisfied, which is diplomatically, right? In many cases, I kept them away, right? So, yeah, don't get too involved in my project. Yeah, I've done that. So, politics is not a bad thing. If you are not putting your personal interest over and above that of the organization, well, then that would not be politics. It will be called manipulation. But more of that in my other video. Keep going through this channel. You'll find a lot of great stuff, right? Just go through it. Coming back to this point, what about these people? These people are people who have very high commitment, like the example that I gave about my country. That's why I'm so interested in elections, of everything which is going on, all the policy decisions that are taken by this country, by the parliament. I'm so heavily engaged into it, but apart from criticizing it or supporting it, what else can I do? I don't have that much of an influence politically. I may have some influence in project management arena, but not in the country's running of things. And therefore, I'm here. I need to be informed. That's why I want to be constantly aware of what is the latest information taken by the government. And when the government is lacking on communication, they don't keep me informed soon enough, I get very irritated, even though I may or may not like that government. So that's the point. Over here, because the commitment is very high, the people are very much clued into the project, but they don't have influence. They cannot change the direction of the project, and therefore, you do not communicate with them as much as you would communicate with these people here, which is high influence, high commitment, which is manage them closely. You will not. You will just keep them informed. That's it. Just keep them informed. That so and so decision has been taken. This is what's going to happen. And this is when the UAT would be done. This is when the testing would be done. This is when the user manuals will be available to you. This is when the trainings will be provided to you. Right? All those kind of things, right? This particular sports facility would be ready by so and so date. All those kind of things are information. The people are happy here the moment they get the right amount of information at the right frequency. And that's good enough, right? But then what about this group here, right? To be very honest, don't bother. But yeah, in PMI, we got to be a little politically correct. So we may say lightly monitor. I just lightly figure out that if any one of these guys, because of the changes in the project, have they shifted here, here, or here, right? It could happen. It does happen in certain projects, right? So just lightly monitor only to figure out if their position changes. Otherwise, there's no need, there's no real need for information, right? If you need something from them, that's the only time you reach out to them. That's it. They are not really interested from commitment point of view or influence point of view in your project, right? So these are the kind of questions they give you. They'll ask you very straightforward questions. Most of the people are not able to understand it because they are more used to listening to power and impact. And then they'll realize, oh, in high power, high interest, we say manage closely, and it's more or less the same, right? So watch here. It's more or less the same. We are using similar terminology with the different names, and people think that this is a completely new grid. So I just wanted to make sure, because people have been sending me screenshots of pictures taken from different places. I don't want to name them, and they asked for my help, because one thing they're sure of, that they'll have absolutely genuine, authentic feedback from me. So what I did is I just thought, let me make it into a video. It's going to help some people. Therefore, there you have it. Very simple, not that difficult. Cool. So in case you've not subscribed to my video channel, go ahead and subscribe, because I keep launching such informative videos every once in a while. And the best thing about our videos is they'll be always factually correct. There will never be anything which is just an opinion or anything. They're very highly researched. So it will make a lot of sense for you to subscribe. And at the same time, you will notice that at PM Pulse, we simply do not advertise. We don't advertise on anything whatsoever. We've actually moved out of that rat race. But we still need promotion. In that case, we would look at great people like you to share. If you like this, please go ahead and share, and as well as subscribe. Enough of that. Well, keep watching, and I'm going to catch you later.